I'm Luca Giliberti, contributing writer for Gold Derby, and I'm joined today by three-time Emmy winner Julianna Margulies, who joined the morning show in its second season as Laura Peterson. So Julianna, throughout your career, there have been many shows that you were part of since the very inception. So how does that experience compare to now having joined a show that was already in the middle of its run?
I'll tell you, it was interesting for me. At first, I was a little bit intimidated, not by the cast, but just because I know what it's like to already be in a moving machine that's well oiled. And so when you come in, you want to just slip right in and fit in. The cast made that very easy to do, honestly. I'm really grateful because my first scene was with Billy Crudup, and I've known him for years from New York. So that it just sort of eased my way in. And then of course, I've known Jen since ER because we shot next door to each other. And I've known Reese sort of on a more of a, as a friend rather than a colleague. But they made it very easy for me, and I felt very welcomed. Also, the fact that Mimi Leader, who directed me on ER, and then the first director of when you first meet Laura Peterson was Leslie Linka Glatter, who not only worked with me on ER, but also worked with me on The Good Wife. So I felt very much at home with the people. It was more sort of trying to establish the character as completely well-rounded as I could when you first meet her. I wanted her to immediately come off as someone who was confident in what she does, very good at her job, and someone who was known in the industry she's in, that both characters, Bradley and Alex, can relate to in a way that they've had a history. So it was a little challenging at first, but then there was just sort of a natural rhythm to it, and I just felt like part of the game.
Right, and all of that almost lends itself to playing the character, right? Because you've described it is that she basically walks into this sandstorm of crazy and becomes sort of the lens through which the audience can witness this insanity. So could you elaborate on that description a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like Laura Peterson was sort of the voice of calm amidst this crazy chaos. Mm-hmm. There's just a storm going on when you meet her, and because she's done so much work personally on her own life, the audience gets to see these characters, the character of Laura and Bradley and Corey, through her eyes, and almost even the work setting through her eyes, because she's removed from it, but she knows it so well. And she's sort of this very calm force in the midst of all this crazy storm that's going on. And I think she sees very clearly what's going on between Alex and Bradley. And also she has a long history with Corey. And I think he really brings her in as someone who needs a rudder for the ship, because it's going off rails a little bit, right? So it was nice to sort of stay very still while all the crazy was going on and just observe.
And at the same time, Laura even tells Corey in her first scene that she just wants to be the absentee parent in this situation. And I think that just speaks to how much of a sense we get of who Laura is almost instantaneously.
Yeah, she has that ability. I mean, she was so well written. And what was really unique about me coming in the second season was that Carrie Aaron had given me this 20-year history of who Laura was before we meet her. And so I had so much to build on and from that it was really easy for me when I saw the written line to know exactly where they were coming from as writers in order to portray Laura the way they wanted her to be portrayed, because that's very rare. Usually, I start in and I make my character's own history, because there has been no show before, with ER and with Carol Hathaway and with Alicia Florrick. I completely had to create a character from scratch, whereas Carrie Aaron had a very specific vision for this character and a very specific history. And so that was actually really interesting to be able to, dive off of that cliff, knowing my entire foundation. So in a strange way, I feel like I lucked into a situation that normally doesn't ever happen, not for actors anyway.
Right. And, to piggyback off of that, we learned rather quickly that she has a rich history with Alex as well, who outed her as a lesbian, which is almost certainly the reason Laura was then fired from YDA. And you have mentioned that in your head, at least, Laura went back to field work after her firing, which I think is such an interesting idea. Why do you think she did that? And do you think it helped her process that period of turmoil in her life?
Well, I like to believe that when she was outed, it was almost, once the drama of it fell away, and once she realized that she had to get back to who she was as a human being, not as a person who was thought of as gay or, can't be on morning television because of her sexual preference. I see Laura as someone who said, wait, why did I start this to begin with? And do I really want to stay in it? And maybe morning television wasn't what I wanted to do anyway. And what most journalists start out doing is field work. And that's really the adrenaline rush and the thrill and the truth telling of it all. I felt for Laura's character, brought her back to herself and kind of freed her from any restraints of what anyone thought about her except her work. Everything else can fall to the wayside, right? Because when I'm on television, and when I say me, I mean Laura, when Laura's reporting the news, it's not about her sexual preference. So there's sort of all the work that she had to do to get back to herself led her back to the field work that she did, that she loved and was so passionate about before all this mishigas happened just because of her sexual orientation. Mm-hmm. And that was actually something that I discussed with Carrie Erin. I said, I really feel like, when people ask me, who did you draw on for Laura Peterson, there were many journalists I drew on. But whenever I hear Christian Amanpour speak about her field work, I get goosebumps from it. There's something about the danger, the respect, the integrity you have as a human being to be brave enough to go out into that field, whether it, that you're in the middle of a war or uncovering an incredible, truth from a horrible tragedy. You are actually there for the people. And there's something empowering about that because it takes away from all your personal life. It's about you telling your story truthfully. And I think that's what Laura ultimately has to do, right? She has to tell her own story truthfully. And once she gets there, I think what was great about season 2 is you actually see at the end of Laura's journey in season 2, when she has that confrontation with Alex, mm-hmm. I think Alex being able to say, yeah, you're right, I did that. And Alex coming to terms with who she is and she stops having to hide her past. You see a freedom in her too. And so it was sort of this unpeeling of this very complicated, long onion, for lack of a better metaphor, that I think in a strange way frees both of those characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get to that scene in just a second. But, before that, I actually want to throw in her parents for a second, because we don't learn that much about her family outside of her indirectly calling her mother an absentee parent and then admitting to having to walk away from people in her family. I believe she tells Bradley that at one point. So What do you think her family life was like, and how early do you think she felt the need to untether herself from it?
That's such a great question, because so what I had learned from Carrie Erin, who wrote the character of Laura, was that when she came out, so she grew up in a very liberal family, very smart, very Ivy League college kind of family, and who were very proud of her for her accomplishments. But when she tells them she's gay, they don't accept that, and she has to walk away from them. And that is really interesting to me, because it sort of erases the myth that liberals always accept their children for who they are. And I really would love to explore that in season 3 to sort of try and understand. I came from very liberal parents, and I know if I had come out to them, they would have said, we just want you happy, we love you. But that wasn't the case with Laura. And that's a complicated history, and one that she had to, you know, sever the ties with her family in order to be truthful to who she was as a human being. But also, how damaging is that? Mm-hmm. And then who is her new family that she finds? Because, you know, the silver lining I always think of a tragic experience is finding out who the people in your life are that you can count on. And so I think that's what gave her so many layers and why people are so interested in this character, because especially from a lot of LGBTQ people that I'm hearing from, it gave them a real sense of worth, because what she's saying is, I'm worthy on my own. I don't need a family to support who I am. I support who I am. And at a certain point in your life, you choose the people who are going to support you.
Absolutely. I think that's really well put. And I think that's why, like you said, that character resonated with so many people. And, you know, you already mentioned that great scene in episode 9 where Laura basically has to explain to Alex that she outed her and completely ignored her and didn't come out in support for her after her firing. You know, this might sound like a strange question, but how long do you think Laura held a grudge against Alex before eventually just letting go of that anger?
That's another great question. You know, I thought about that long and hard, because I think Laura probably held a grudge for a few years until she really started going to therapy and dealing with her own self and realizing that it wasn't Alex that ruined her life. It was her reaction to Alex. We have no power over people. And I think people who are really well-rounded and grounded and feel secure and confident are people who realize that the power lies within themselves. So, you know, it's that Buddhist saying where you draw the circle and you stand in the circle and you don't let anyone in to hurt you. You know, if you step over the line, you won't survive. So you know how to draw that circle around yourself. You have no power over someone's reaction to anything you do. You only have power of yourself. And I think for Laura, by the time she lets go of that, she's probably let go of it a good 10 years before she meets Alex in the interview, where you see her interviewing Alex in Laura's first episode on the show. But I think that she is very aware that Alex has absolutely nothing to do with her life. And she probably hasn't thought about Alex in a long, long time. So the fact that she's taking up space in Alex's head is just silly to Laura, because, you know, just get on with your life and worry about yourself. You have no power over me. And Laura knows that she certainly has no power over Alex, and she doesn't want it. That's the key, right? She has no interest in it. She doesn't want it.
And, you know, I asked that because what really hit the nail on the head for me, as someone who was outed, though under completely different circumstances, of course, is when Laura says, I imagine you had no ill intent, but we are our actions. I think this is very honest.
Truly one of the best lines, I think. I felt so guilty. I said to Kara, I was like, I think you gave me the best line in the show. Like, that is such a great line for audiences to hear, because I do believe that we don't really mean ill will when we're gossiping, you know, and to be able to be big enough to remove yourself from that and not let it affect you anymore. That's growth. And I think especially because we live in this crazy world where judgment is so rampant and everyone has a loud, you know, speaker to say what they feel, it's so important for your own self-discovery and your own development to say, it's not you may feel that way, but that has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, from there, I want to make the jump or the transition over to Laura's relationship with Bradley. And I actually want to start with the kiss at the end of episode 3, because I know it was very important to you to make sure that it was consensual. So talk about working on that scene with Reese Witherspoon to ensure that that was the case.
Yeah, that's when I really tipped my hat off to Reese. I mean, I've always been a huge admirer of hers, but as a not just a colleague working with me, but as a producer. She's an executive producer of that show. And we were rehearsing the scene and she said, wait a minute, just because we're two women doesn't mean that this isn't sexual harassment if I just lean over and kiss her without her permission. We're a Me Too movement show. This is how it all started. So how can we make this okay? And so we rehearsed it with Leslie Linka Glatter. And I said, well, I don't think Laura is stupid enough to not to realize that you're leaning forward to kiss her so she doesn't have to answer the question, which the question was, were you vetted for this job? Because Laura's, I think, incredibly in tune to Bradley's situation and has also realized that Bradley has been in the orbit only of Corey and Alex, not of anyone else. So who has her best interests at heart? And so when she asks that, I think, and I don't think it's something she's going to divulge to the public. I think she just really wants to know, and she wants Bradley to be honest with her. So when Bradley leans forward to kiss her, I said, well, if I reciprocate that kiss, then it's not harassment. What it is a highly sexualized, really sexy moment. And so we worked it out that way, and to make it okay, because it wouldn't have been okay. If Laura wasn't comfortable with that, Laura would have said, hey, what are you doing? And that would have opened up a whole can of worms and we would have had to write a different episode, So that's how we came to that. And it was because Reese had the wherewithal to say, guys, hold on a minute. Sexual harassment is sexual harassment regardless of gender preference. And so I was really grateful she did that. And I think it set us up in a much better way and a stronger way to continue our affair.
Definitely. And their relationship is so interesting because they are basically two opposites, which creates some friction between them, especially when Laura is very honest about her feelings toward Bradley's repression in episode 4. So talk about preparing that monologue and expressing what appears to be years worth of frustration in such clear and direct terms.
Was that the episode where I say, was that the monologue where I say I'm a little jealous. I paved the way for you.
Exactly.
That was the one. Yeah,
exactly.
That was a good, they gave me the best lines. They were so easy to learn. When writing is really good, learning them is easy. Mm-hmm. When writing isn't good, it's very difficult to learn lines. I found Laura's monologue so easy to learn. I think it was probably, I'm hoping that so many LGBTQ people across the board in our industry and in the news world were able to appreciate what Carrie Aaron wrote in that scene, to be able to say, oh my God, are you kidding me? You're not going to come out now? When I've paved the road for you, when I got fired just for being gay, but I climbed back up and I opened that door for so many people. It's what Ellen DeGeneres went through, It's like she basically said, this is who I am, either accept me or don't accept me. And the world accepted her. And that opened doors. And this all happened at the same time around when Ellen DeGeneres came out. And she was incredibly successful. She didn't have to come out, she took a gamble because she wanted to say, this is my truth and I don't want to hide it anymore. And I shouldn't. Why should you? Who cares? If you're entertaining and funny and people love you, what does it matter who you love? It makes no sense to me. So that monologue, I think, is an eye opener for Bradley, but she's so emotional in that scene. She's so, she has her blinders on, because it's all about getting to the next level in her job. And none of it seems to be about getting to the next level in her job and staying truthful to herself. Mm-hmm. And Laura sees that everything is transparent to Laura. And so that monologue for me was so much fun. And also, I have to tell you, I had to hold back tears when I said it.
Wow.
Because I just can't imagine how many people have felt that way, you know? Like that stuff is really emotional to me, because those are those are the people that should be idolized, I think. Those are the people that should be on the Time 100 every year. Those are the people who are saying to little kids who are scared at 7 to say, I feel different, you know, that she's saying, be who you are, stop worrying, because if we don't all start showing up as who we are, then we're constantly going to be fighting this fight. And so to me, it was a really powerful monologue, and it was an eye-opener just as a human being, and as someone who has, you know, my world is just full of LGBTQ people. I'm in the theater, you know, it's what I do, all my best friends. And it just made me realize, like, wow, have I been aware enough of the struggle?
Mm-hmm. You know, kudos to the show for going there, because I haven't seen that type of honesty on television ever, probably in my life. And I think it was very refreshing to see someone enunciate all these thoughts. I mean, the fact that she tells Bradley that she should consider herself lucky that she can come out in 2021 as opposed to the late 90s, that's just something I felt. And when she says, there is something inside me that makes me want to resent you, I just think, again, that really, really hits the nail on the head again. And on a final note, wouldn't you say that Laura's honesty, the fact that she doesn't cuddle Bradley like others might, and is very upfront about how she feels, that is the reason the two of them work so well together?
Yeah, I think Laura's past the point of, I won't say hand-holding, because I do think there is a bit of hand-holding that she needs to do for Bradley on different levels. One is that Bradley is also more of a newbie to this business. So just on a business level, you know, she had that great moment in bed where Bradley's getting dressed and she's like, oh, go easy, man. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. You know, like Bradley's always in attack mode. And Laura knows that attack mode is just loud. It doesn't get the job done. So in that way, she is a bit of a mentor. And then you have the juxtaposition of the sexuality and being truthful to who you are as a person, where I think she's trying to guide her in showing her that, especially when you know, I think the two go hand in hand, what Bradley's dealing with her family and what Bradley's dealing with her sexuality, because Bradley isn't necessarily just, she might be bisexual. We don't know yet, exactly. Right? So, and you have to leave that door open in order for Bradley to grow as a character, and especially to be able to come to terms with her own being. Like, do I want to be with, you know I have a lot of friends. One of my best friends from college, who is a lesbian, suddenly fell in love with a man. And she was like, I just like people. You know, I fall in love with the person. And I get that. You know, I've been around her with women. I've been around her when she's with men. You know, she's like, I love people. And that's great. Oh, shouldn't we all just love people? You know? So I think that it's a slippery slope, because also you cannot forget that Laura is also a sexual human being who has needs and wants too. And you don't always want to be the gardener. You want to be the flower in a relationship too. So it's not going to bode well for them if Laura feels that she's not getting back what she's giving all the time.
Right.
Right. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, I can't wait to see what happens with this character in season 3 and with this relationship. I'm so glad that we're getting a season 3, because this is such a fascinating character. So thank you so much for taking the time today to speak to me. It was such a pleasure, Julianna.
Thank you. Likewise. You asked great questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you.